TC Jewfolk is supported by Maslin LLP, a Minneapolis commercial law firm dedicated to providing solutions for businesses, supporting the community, and advancing civil rights for more than 65 years. With particular appreciation of partner Leora Maccabee's contributions as a founder of TC Jewfolk, Maslin is proud to uphold the legacy of our founders Samuel H. Maslin, Marvin Borman, Hy Edelman, and Irving Brand. We are committed to serving both the community and the profession, as well as providing an exceptional standard in the practice of law. From corporate counsel to bet the company litigation, Maslin LLP. Online at maslon.com. Shana Tova to all. Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I sit down with Cantor Ben Tisser, the newest clergy member at Beth El Synagogue. We talk about taking over from the venerable Audrey Abrams, starting high holiday preparations months before moving to town, and blending his tunes with Beth El traditions on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Cantor Ben Tisser, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're the new cantor at Beth El.
That's what they tell me.
So how has your first couple of months been?
It's been really great. I have to admit, I was very nervous moving up here that I would be moving up to a building that was closed and a sanctuary that was empty. And I got here right in time. I started July 1st, and the first Shabbat I was here was the first time the synagogue was open, really.
That had been nice to be doing services with at least something close to a full crowd, or at least some crowd.
It was a very full crowd.
Was it?
It was the first week was incredible. I mean, to see a couple hundred folks coming to synagogue who hadn't been together for over a year.
Yeah. I say after 15, 16 months of not being able to, it's got to be nice for people to get back in.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the community has been incredible about both encouraging the reopening of the synagogue and supporting us in doing it. But I really felt like that moment was like one of those, historic moments in our almost 100-year history.
So you, as we said, you are new. You are replacing the venerable Cantor Audrey Abrams, who obviously is both a delightful human being and a wonderful cantor. What's it like filling those shoes?
Well, my feet don't actually fit in her shoes, though they are very. She leaves very
touche.
She leaves very big shoes to fill. Cantor Abrams was one of the first people I met. I just kind of an aside related, but in a very sort of unusual way, both Cantor Abrams and Cantor Newman were on the search committee.
Okay.
For the synagogue, which is really not too common. You typically you would see a retired or nearing retired cantor sort of stepping aside and letting the synagogue move forward. So I was a little bit wasn't put off at all because they're both so lovely. But it was a new experience. And what I learned about this community is it's a community that just loves its clergy, and it's so clear why. She's amazing. We are, I would say, very different in our backgrounds, which is also very cool because we therefore get to share in our presentation of liturgy and teaching to the congregation. We are working together this year, which is great. She's very much involved on a regular basis as Cantor Emerita. But to be really only the fifth cantor in a 100-year history means that people really have shared so much of their life with my predecessors.
Yeah.
And it really gives me a beautiful opportunity to sort of carry that tradition of being so deeply involved in people's lives and having this very strong connection to the previous cantors. It's great. 5
cantors in 100 years, you're looking at basically each cantor spans a generation of life of the congregation.
Yeah.
Feels like that would also, in some ways, a lot of pressure it would think attached to that too. Not to unnecessarily pile any on you, but
there's no pressure at all to live up to Cantor Abrams.
Okay. That's good then.
No.
But it does. That is sort of, I think, when you think about it in that perspective, there's. I think that's just sort of incredible that you've had so few predecessors over the life of the congregation of the synagogue.
Yes, it's increasingly rare
Yeah.
to hear such a small number of cantors at a congregation. And it's an amazing thing. Cantor Abrams actually was much more than a generation. She was assistant cantor before Chazan Sheni, and she was programming director before. I think she's been at Beth El for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And Cantor Newman was here 37 years as senior cantor. I mean, these are long tenures. So there is some pressure, as I joke with people, not to screw up, so that we can. But it's really. That sort of stability is exactly what we wanted, and we knew that, we learned very quickly that coming to the Twin Cities, God willing, would provide that for us. It's as much a beautiful thing for the congregation as it is for the clergy.
I didn't realize that Cantor Newman had been there so long.
27 years. I'm sorry, did I say 37?
You said 37.
No, it came in 1980, I believe.
Okay, so
27 years.
But, over the if you're the fifth cantor, there's half of the cantors that have been at the synagogue before you are still very involved.
Yes.
Which is kind of great.
It's great for continuity. I will say, having made a couple of professional transitions in the past, it's really daunting to walk into a shul and, Rosh Hashanah is like 3.5 days after you start, and you get the tune wrong. In fact, that happened to me when I got to Chicago. There was a tune at Ne'ilah, right before the repetition of the Amidah, right? So it's the peak moment. The whole community's in one room, couple thousand Jews, choirs on the bima, ready to go. And I didn't have sheet music, and I'm a pretty quick study, but the tune that I knew came out.
Oh, no.
From a previous congregation. So in the second chorus of this, 6-verse piyut poem, the rabbi says, okay, stop. Let's show Cantor Tisser how it's done.
Oh, no.
And he really didn't mean anything by it. That was his,
right.
For him, that was Ne'ilah, and that was great. So having Cantor Abrams here, we meet regularly to go over these things, because there are little variances in the melody, or how a congregation fits the words to the music, or, there might be 3 or 4 different tunes for a particular text that I should be rotating. Having that history allows me to... I think create an easier transition for the congregation. Yeah, because there are several things. Number one, they've had Cantor Abrams for, as we said, so many years. So to have a male voice now is a big change. Mm-hmm. To have another set of melodies is a big change. To have a new person who, whereas Cantor Abrams really was. She kind of rose through the ranks within the community. So she had already been so deeply involved. I'm really the first new cantor since 1980. The first cantor who came from the outside in over 40 years. That's where I feel the pressure.
Yeah. Which is, Minnesota can be tough on people who aren't from Minnesota. I don't know if you've heard that yet.
I've heard that. Highland Park, Chicago, was sort of the same way.
Okay.
It was kind of an insular, multi-generational community. I think here it's a little bit tighter because the area is much smaller.
Yes.
So there aren't as many suburbs that
are... We're not Chicagoland by any means,
no.
numbers-wise.
No. So, yes, I mean, it certainly presents, I would say, some challenges to anyone being new, clergy or not.
Yeah.
But once you get in, what I found is it really is... in some ways literally, but also figuratively, one big family. Yeah. Everyone knows each other. Everyone knows who went to school with whom. Kids for 4 generations.
For better or worse.
For better or for worse, right. Right. And we've gotten to know our neighbors. I mean, how many parts of the country do you actually meet the people who live on your street within a few weeks?
Right.
It's been a very, very cool transition in that way.
So you've mentioned that you came here from Highland Park. Yeah. Illinois. What was it that brought you here? What was it about this opportunity that you thought now's a good time to transition to somewhere new?
Well, so I'll tell the story. I mean, we knew that we were looking for a change. I needed to transition out of Chicago for a number of reasons. or from Beth El, I should say, not necessarily from Chicago. I was looking for a different professional fit.
Okay.
We'd been there 6 years, and we have so many great friends in that congregation. It was a real blessing to have been there. But it was, well, we were looking for a transition. And we applied to a number of places. There was a placement service through the Cantor's Assembly where we go through, and shuls will post a questionnaire, and there's some information given. And I kind of went down the list, and I applied to 2 or 3 places. And then my wife, Robin, says to me, "Wait a minute, scroll back up." I said, "Okay." She says, "What about that shul in Minnesota? That's a big congregation." I said, "Yeah, but it's Minnesota." And she says to me, "You should apply." I said, "Well, there was another big congregation in Minnesota that opened up a few years ago, and I looked at it, and it sounded great, except it was Minnesota, so I didn't apply." And she said, "Well, don't be so cocky. You don't have a job yet, and you want a new opportunity. Maybe apply for..." Right, that was the look that I had on my face.
Good to have a wife put you in your place sometimes.
Yes, Eshet Chayil Mi'imsa. That's my Eshet Chayil. Yeah. So I said, fine. So we applied for the position, and it took a while till we heard back. Many candidates applied for this pulpit. It's a very prestigious pulpit, a very prestigious congregation for those who know the movement. I mean, USY was founded here, and so many other things were started here with Rabbi Aronson and Rabbi Abelson and Rabbi Kahn, and now Rabbi Davis and Olitsky. So I applied for it, and we had interviews with several congregations, and they were all really lovely. And then we met this group of people, and we was like, okay, that was nice. Maybe we'll get to talk to them. And then again, and we a few weeks later had a second round Zoom interview. And a couple of days after that, I said, gosh, I really hope I hear back from these people. I'm starting to miss them a little bit. And then we were invited for the big interview, which this year was so strange. I mean, we were like 3 days on Zoom, and then we had this wonderful Saturday night Zoom event after Shabbat. And then we had to get up at 5 a.m. to fly up here for 36 hours or 24 hours, whatever it was. And so it was just like, it was like an Indian wedding. It was like a 5-day thing with dozens and dozens and dozens of Twin Cities Jews. And we knew, we got up here, neither of us had been here. Robin's from Florida and lived there her whole life till a few years ago. She moved to Chicago. I'm from L.A., so if you would have asked the little boy in the valley, what do you think of living in Minnesota in your late 30s? I would have said, you're nuts. Yeah. But we got up here and we said, all right, this is it. This is it. And we hope they feel the same way.
That's awesome. And it's sort of, and that's really the process. I've always, both with rabbi and cantor searches, the process is so fascinating to me. I think, especially right out of school, it's been described to me as sort of like a, like a med school, like a matching type process, where you list yours, they list theirs, and if it lines up, then that may be where you end up. But and also the timing of it, like you'd said, it's the way the contract year works, it's July 1 through June 30th. Yeah. Well, you started to place July 1, and this year you have, 6 weeks. 6 weeks or so until you're really immersed in holiday prep. But this year it's so early that I gotta imagine you got here and that was almost one of the first things on your plate.
We were in holiday prep before the contract was signed. We were in holiday prep. I mean, that's really what it was. Yeah. We are hoping that by week 7.5, which is middle of next week, we'll actually know exactly what we're doing on Rosh Hashanah. We have a great plan. By the way, for all of those who are looking for a place to go, this is the plug. Come to Beth El. All you need is a mask and a vaccination card, and you are welcome in our doors. And I can promise you that the experience are going to be great. I'm very impressed and proud of what we're going to do this year. But yeah, as you say, it's a little different for the rabbis. Actually, they have a really interesting thing. It's called Interview Week at the seminary. Yeah. Where shuls from the two seminaries get together at either New York or LA, and shuls from around the country looking for, small shuls looking for senior clergy and larger shuls looking for associate rabbis will just come, and it's speed dating basically. And for cantors, it's a little different. It's all through the placement service, but it is like the way Haredi dating is portrayed in the movies, where you basically have 2 quick dates and you decide if you're getting married for a few years. That's kind of how it works.
Fascinating.
It's
such a bizarre concept.
It is, and
like on especially to the outside.
Yeah, I mean, and you're dating the congregation because, of course, we serve the congregation. But then the clergy are also kind of dating each other.
Absolutely.
It's am I the right fit for this community? Am I the right voice for this community? Do the values that I would preach line up with the values of the community? And then how do I work with the rabbi?
Right.
Because that's always, as a cantor, that's another piece. I feel like I won the lottery. I mean, I have in both of our rabbis found great friends and partners. With my predecessors, I couldn't ask for. I mean, they really have become friends. I mean, we talk almost daily, and in the congregation, it really feels like home already.
That's awesome.
I screw up a melody here and there, or
sure.
Or
you're going to.
I don't screw up a melody. I'm teaching them a new melody. That's what I do. I teach them a new melody once in a while, but it's thank God we did well this time.
That's good. So how different? Like you mentioned the melodies. You mentioned your experience at your synagogue in Highland Park. How different is what you both grew up with, what you learned, what you had done on previous pulpits? How different is the Beth El experience from all of that? And are you trying to infuse your own into it, or this first year are you just sort of learning and then giving yourself a little more time to teach?
It's a great question. So where I grew up is really different than most shuls in the country, I think. It was a really unique congregation. I grew up at Valley Beth Shalom in Los Angeles, in Encino. So it was, at the time, a congregation of near 2,000 families. I couldn't tell you how many rabbis we had. An immense music program. It was a conservative, very liberal, open, welcoming conservative congregation. We davened with organ and choirs and bands and string quartets, and housed the LA Jewish Symphony and housed the LA Jewish Music Commission. It was a really music-centric congregation in that way. I've worked in a variety of congregations. Sort of the highlights of my career were working at B'nai Torah in Boca Raton, which was an incredibly music-centric community. And then Beth El in Highland Park, North Suburban Beth El, which really had a beautiful history of music, and at the same time was a very traditional congregation, right of center on the spectrum of conservative Judaism. So in that way, I've had a lot of different experiences. I find that Beth El is Beth El, Minneapolis.
Yes.
Right. The Beth El is a really fine balance of where I grew up and other things I've experienced and sort of where I want to be. And it seems to me that Cantor Abrams has left the congregation in a musical place that has done some incredible exploratory work over the past decade or so, learning about new trends in Jewish music and sacred chant. And it's really primed to sort of keep exploring. And at the same time, when I opened the book of choir music for Rosh Hashanah, so much of that music is steeped in at least 40 years, 50 years of tradition. Okay. And the synagogue doesn't want to let go of that.
Sure.
And that is incredible.
Yeah.
So I am cognizant of all of that. And at the same time, and I'm very engaged in learning the musical tradition. I do find moments to infuse myself, because I think that just as it's important for me to really take a lot of time to get to know the congregation, I think the congregation needs to get to know me as well.
Yeah.
So they should know that I'm a person who values tradition and who values the really long-standing musical heritage of the shul and of the Jewish people in general. But I'm also a composer. I'm also an arranger. I enjoy looking at tefillah from different angles and perspectives and challenging the congregation to join me in that.
So, great segue. You mentioned you're a composer.
Yes.
You a few months ago now, I guess in May, you put out a new CD called Hagyon Libi, which is, I guess, why don't you, I mean, I could explain it, but why don't you tell the listeners what that is?
Rabbi Schwab, who I worked with in Chicago when we discussed that I would be transitioning on this year. He asked me what the synagogue could do to sort of honor me. And in the midst of COVID, that was a challenging thing. Really, what I wanted more than anything was to see my friends before we left in person. But I said, how about a CD? And on the CD, what ended up being included are 3 or 4 tracks featuring young folks from the synagogue who would sing with me in the choir on the high holidays. We had really, not music that I wrote, but music that I brought to the congregation that really became beloved over the last 6 years. And I wanted to preserve that, both for the children who sang and for the community. And then the rest is original music. And it's really the first time I put any of it out there. And it was a crazy experience during COVID. But at the end of the day, like, wow, it's out there. It was very cool to do that.
That's awesome. So had you, I guess, what came first? Wanting to be like the musician, composer, arranger, or being a cantor?
I think being a cantor.
Okay.
I started davening when I was about 6 years old with my cantor in LA, and fast forward about 7-8 years, I became the organist of the congregation for the cantor, and that's really
at like 13 or 14.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, our organist passed away he passed away, and he was a really noted composer.
Okay.
His name was Ami Aloni. We actually sing some of his music here at Beth El.
Oh wow.
Which is great. He's
That's
really
awesome.
an internationally known composer.
Okay.
And a wonderful teacher. And that's really where I learned my nusach and my davening. There was no music for the cantor. He just went, and you followed him, or sometimes led him.
Okay.
And that was my job till my early 20s when I found a cantorial pulpit in Los Angeles. So I knew that I always wanted to be involved in Jewish music. I studied composition with Ami. I studied composition with Mike Isaacson, who's a very, very noted composer. His music is heard in the Holocaust Museum in D.C. He composed for Hawaii Five-0. He's been commissioned for hundreds of works of sacred music.
Okay.
For synagogue. And really just in the last, I would say, I composed a number of pieces while I was in seminary, so about 10 years ago or so.
Okay.
And then really through COVID, when there wasn't much performance going on, I found that I would just get these little snippets in my head, and so I started recording whatever came to me in voice memos on my phone. And finally I sat down, I was like, okay, I got to do something with this, and it just started pouring out. And I realized that, now going on 15, 16 years on a full-time pulpit, I guess I've developed my own idea of what to say about these familiar words, which is exactly what I try and teach cantorial students and congregants, that they can't just be rote. The words have to be alive. They have to live within us, and then when they do, we end up with our own ideas of what to say about them or how to express them.
And when you put your own music and you put your own arrangement, your own spin on that kind of, and sort of those classic works or, ideas of work, it does give it new life, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Sometimes it's a little bit scary. On the album, there's a piece called Zacharti Lach, which is, of course, one of the famous texts from Zichronot, the section of Rosh Hashanah Musaf where we talk about God as the one who remembers. Mm-hmm. There are 2 or 3 very, very famous, there are many more, but 2 or 3 very famous choir pieces that are just sung the world over for 50 years, 100 years, one of them over 100 years. So to touch that text was sort of a scary thing. I had my own reason for touching it, and the information about the story behind it's on the website, on my website. But it was, there was this moment where I said, wait a minute, of course I have what to say about it, but do I really, is it that good? Is what I have to say that good that I would dare tread on this very sacred musical territory,
Yeah.
And whether it's good or not is very subjective.
Sure.
But it was that important to me that I had to do it.
And that's sort of the difference. It's important to you to do it, good or not good that's other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I was, I accomplished and said what I needed to say.
Right.
There was something very personal about it. Other times, I just, got tired of singing the same Sim Shalom every week, so I wrote two different ones, and they're on the album, and they're both very different in nature, and I think, they represent sort of the breadth of the ideas that go through my mind, but they also represent different ideas of what does peace mean,
Right.
So there's a lot of thought that goes into it.
I would think it would have to, especially if you're going to touch some of these, like as you said, the more sacred sort of songs or texts or ideas that come out at the high holidays.
Yeah, and there are so many different ways to approach setting this, writing music in general. Oftentimes, I have a lot of friends who are visual artists, so I have friends who will first sit down and, they know what they want to paint or what they're looking to accomplish on the canvas overall, but they will sit and they will measure and they will think about what canvas size and what sort of matting will go with it and what sort of frame will go with it. And all of that happens before they even take the pencil to begin their sketch, which is one of the very early steps. I have other friends who simply take a palette and take paint and go to work. And it's not that it's without thought, it's just a different way of approaching it. I will think about, sometimes if I have a commission, then of course I have to think about, who am I writing for? Whose voice is going to be singing this, at least initially? Is it for a service? Is it for concert? Is it for a funeral or for a wedding? Mm-hmm. What the purpose is. But otherwise, so often it just kind of comes to me, and I really, it matters less to me where will this ultimately be used than it does, I feel like I have something to share, and maybe someone will be inspired by it or touched by it, or whatever, and therefore I also don't sell the music. I mean, the album is up for free online. The sheet music is for free online. I just want people to access, for whatever it's worth, my way of thinking. And if they like it, great. And if they want to use it, I'm honored. But just to know that it's out there,
So you mentioned commission work. We talked before we started recording. You had mentioned you were doing some other. You started a business over COVID, doing some consulting work around your, around singing and being a cantor and the voice work. How do you fit sort of all of the other things into the very 24/7 job of being a cantor?
That's all it is, 24/7.
So I'm told.
Yeah.
Probably somebody was selling it short.
Yeah. So, I kind of see it as all interrelating. We started this this company. It was actually virtual content production for congregations and audio and video, thinking about, as early as last May or June, what my own congregation would do, but understanding the limitations of being in a very traditional congregation that really doesn't deal with technology. And, we installed a beautiful live stream system, but that was the extent of it. There were no pre-recordings or anything like that during the services, but many other congregations were. So I was thinking about, what are some of the different ways that we could help other congregations. Mm-hmm. Personally and selfishly, I had a need for a creative outlet. It was very simple. I had canceled performances. We were not yet open in person, and I'm sure my colleagues and I'm sure our congregants will relate to this. There is something nice about being able to enjoy a service at home in your living room with your family around you and your cup of coffee.
Not gonna lie, it's kind of okay,
right? On the other hand, as the person leading the service, there was something incredibly unfulfilling about standing in my living room, and we have some great photographs of me in my, shirt and tie and gym shorts and slippers, because when they can only see you from the chest up, it just doesn't matter, right?
Absolutely.
I needed more than that. I needed something to share. I needed to help people. We couldn't go to the hospitals. We couldn't visit people. That whole, I think so many of us who are in clergy, whether rabbis and cantors, there's just a part of it, a part of us that needs to be helping people in their lives in some way.
Is the pastoral care that you couldn't do?
The pastoral care, right, and so much of that is through music.
Yeah.
I know that when we daven on the bima, we are changing people's hearts and souls. That's a pastoral moment as much as it's a prayer moment.
Yeah.
So we were blessed to be able to help a number of congregations think creatively and and produce some content. We were able to do some ultimately for my own congregation, and in terms of how it interplays with the job, I just gained a whole new skill set.
Oh,
and I really see synagogues, we are stuck with technology, whether we like it or not, for the long run. We are no longer just the Beth El in St. Louis Park. We are the Beth El that the entire world can access now.
right.
And there's something daunting about that. We cannot forget about our local neighborhood. We cannot forget about our city and our obligation to it. But the quality of the programming we do, I believe, is worthy that people outside of Twin Cities would want to be involved.
Yeah.
And so I gained the skills to help, at least in one small way, get that out there in a way that is appealing, hopefully, to a broader group. In terms of composing, look, I think that when clergy put ourselves out there, whether we think about it or not, and we do, I think, for the most part, it's all in the name of our congregation.
Yeah.
My name is, whatever it is, my name is much more important because I work with this congregation. So the music I write, the material I put out, whether it be a recording, a class, or whatever, I feel represents my congregation, and I hope would be a source of pride to the congregation.
Yeah.
Just as if the rabbi were to lecture at a university or to participate in an international mission or something, brings pride and prestige to our congregation, knowing that our rabbi is out there changing the Jewish world.
Yeah.
That's how I hope it interplays. We'll see.
And I mean, obviously it's early days here, so
Yes.
who's to say yet how it'll
Sure,
go,
we'll find
but
out.
We'll learn one way or the other, right?
We will, and I can say the congregation and the rabbis have been very supportive of it. They've been very supportive of the idea that I would take time to write music, to learn music, to explore music, and then to bring it to the community.
Right, because ultimately those skill sets, like you said, it comes back to,
of course,
you representing Beth El and
absolutely
this congregation. That means something.
Right, and
Or
who wouldn't want to represent such a great congregation? Yeah. I mean, it's an honor.
Right, absolutely.
It really is. Yeah.
So, as when this airs, we will be almost a week out from Rosh Hashanah. As early as
I thought we canceled that this year.
I don't think that's how I certainly don't have that authority, but no, I don't think so. But what do you most look forward to when you're on the bima for high holidays, whether it's with the choir, whether it's with other cantors? What is sort of that moment like for you?
Singing the first Chatzi Kaddish is when I know that the holidays have begun.
Okay.
That's, to look out, and I don't know who I'm going to be looking out at this year. We'll be looking out at people on Zoom. We'll be looking out at people via our live stream. We will be looking out at people in the sanctuary. But to see whoever I see, to watch the eyes go when they hear the first time, and to see the flood of memories that comes back into their minds. Grandparents who remember being children in that sanctuary or on the north side in the old sanctuary, and they can now share that moment with their grandkids. That to me is what the holidays is about. So there are different moments for different people, but for me it's that first Chatzi Kaddish and then opening Ne'ilah, which are the moments that really touch my heart. I will say that I get very emotional on Kol Nidrei night. I haven't shared this publicly too often, but, hi, nice to meet you all. I get very emotional Kol Nidrei night. This year is going to be no exception because I'll be sharing it with Cantor Abrams. So it's really that Ledor Vador passing the torch, which I know will be even more emotional for the congregation. But what strikes me every year, as I put on my robe backstage and I'm warming up my voice, I remember being a little boy in the sanctuary. And I talk to my cantor every week. I mean, we're still so close, and I remember his voice. And that, to me, is what Kol Nidrei is. That's my memory. And then I see I'm tearing up right now, because I think about the the responsibility that I carry, because my voice, God willing, for some group of children in the room, for some generation, that's going to be the voice they remember from childhood. Talk about pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, as if singing Kol Nidre isn't enough.
Right.
It's this piece that has like a 2-octave range, and you've just eaten a dinner that's supposed to carry you through 25 hours. So you're singing this big piece on a full stomach, which is not the most comfortable thing.
I
Ask
wouldn't
any
think
singer.
so.
No, it's not ideal. But on a very kind of like deep level, that's the moment that people remember. And it's my job to make it beautiful and to make it meaningful, and yet to hopefully bring something relevant to it, some new something. I don't know. We're not going to change the Kol Nidre,
No.
and we shouldn't. But and it's the strangest text if you study it. Like this is the text that generations of rabbis tried to eliminate from high holidays. It's just a legal formula. It's not even Yom Kippur yet when we sing it.
Oh,
Look
yeah.
outside. We have to finish with it. You can't do a contract on Yom Kippur
True.
or an annulment, right? So it's not even Yontiv yet. And people are rushing to shul, putting on their telesim because they don't want to miss it. And the reason the rabbis kept it for all these thousands of years is the music. That's it. So it's my job not to screw that up, so that a generation of children will hear the Kol Nidre, and when they become grandparents, they'll tell their grandkids, God willing, that I had this cantor when I was a kid. That's a lot of pressure, but it's such a privilege,
Boy, that really does hit you right in the
I'm
right in the
telling
feels
you.
there, huh?
Yeah, I have a colleague who told the story. He works at a very old synagogue, well over, I think, 150 years old in Montreal. And he tells the story that each year before Kol Nidre, the president of the congregation walks out onto the pulpit ahead of the cantor with a torn-up, yellowed note card and basically reads to the congregation an invitation to the cantor. On behalf of the Board of Trustees and the rabbi and the congregation, we invite you to represent us in prayer. Like, wow. What a thing. That's the job. I'm sorry to turn this in such a heavy direction.
No. But yeah, that's the job.
That's the job. I mean, the formula we recite before Kol Nidre is basically by permission of the heavenly court and the lowly court and the Beit Din of Torahs and clergy on the Bima, we give permission for us to pray with those who have sinned. But talk about another level of like the congregation. We don't think about it, but the congregation gives the clergy permission to lead them in prayer each holidays. That's huge.
Never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I never thought about it in that way.
Yeah.
It's amazing though.
It is it's a privilege. There's no other word for it.
Right.
It's a privilege, it's an honor, it's daunting, and then this is the first year, so it's like a little bit extra pressure perhaps.
Yeah, different level of pressure. I don't know if it's going to be more necessarily or just different, but like this isn't yes, it's your first time with this Beth El, but it's not like you're fresh out of school.
No.
You've done this for most of your life.
Yeah.
Been on the Bima in some way for the high holidays and just even
years.
for the regular services and at large during the week.
Yeah.
This is not your first time.
No, this will be my 23rd year on the Bima in some capacity for high holidays.
Wow.
So yeah, 17th round of Kol Nidre. I was thinking about that the other day. It's getting near time to retire, I think. It's a lot of years.
Don't let the Beth El people hear you say that. You just got here.
No, we'll be here. You're stuck with us.
Oh, good.
I've been saying.
Well, Ben Tisser, last two questions, and we
Sure.
will let you get back to your preparation. What is your favorite Jewish food?
Oh gosh, all right, it's two, but they go together.
That's fine.
Gefilte fish and brisket,
Okay.
right? Nothing like a homemade gefilte fish. I would say of all the things I'll miss in Highland Park from the community are my two friends, Barbara and Rachel, who would come twice a year with homemade gefilte fish, 2 varieties each. And it made my yontiv, not to have to make the gefilte fish.
That's right.
And then brisket. I mean, it's just so versatile.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had, my grandmother's brisket. We have another friend's recipe. This year we're going to try smoking the brisket.
Oh, okay.
Try something new.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of it. Big, heavy food.
Oh, yeah. No, those are good
Very
choices.
Jewish.
Very Jewish.
Very Jewish.
And what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Wow, that's a great question.
I always love asking clergy that question, just because you typically have a different, I'm not going to say a deeper understanding necessarily, although that may be true, but you think about it probably at a different level than most people might.
Yeah. I would say Yom Kippur.
Okay.
Honest to God, Yom Kippur. I get to spend 25 hours or, the majority of 25 hours basically at the highest level of my craft, taking people on a really deeply spiritual journey. And that's the one day a year where I know everyone in there is really there for a deeply spiritual reason. Whether it is they're honoring their parents by coming to shul, they're hearing the music, whatever. It is impossible to leave a sanctuary on Yom Kippur, I think, unchanged. So that to me is it. I will admit I love Simchas Torah as a Jew, as a clergy person. I kind of, it's like that one extra day of Yontiv, and it's like by that time, I'm ready to be on a beach somewhere for 48 hours.
For sure. By then you'll have earned it.
Then we'll have earned it. Except then that's when the year starts. But yeah, Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is it for me.
Excellent. Well, Cantor Ben Tisser, thank you so much for
Lonnie.
joining me, but I'm in your backyard. So thank you for having me over to talk.
Thank you. You're our first, by the way. You're our first guest in the backyard.
Well, thank you. It's lovely. Check out bentisser.com. They can hear your new music. They can learn about you, whatever we didn't cover here. If there are other things we didn't cover, but other things you've done, listen to the new music. Go check it out there.
And I would say check out bethelsynagogue.org. The High Holiday. I mean, I have to make the plug, but I mean it with all my heart. The High Holiday Hub is up. We're open to the community. No tickets, no reservations. Just come pray with us.
And we will have a link to that in the show notes as well. But Cantor, welcome to the Twin Cities. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.